Welcome, everyone. This is Joe Dager, the host of the Business 901 podcast. With me today is Ben Reason. Ben is the co-founder of Livework, one of the leading service design agencies in the UK, and the author of Service Design, From Insight to Implementation, and his most recent publication, Service Design for Business. Ben, I would like to welcome you. And I might have shortchanged your work limiting the scope to the service design and the UK, but can you expand on that for me and tell me the scope of Livework and your work more?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Joe. It's very nice to join you. So yes, you've shortchanged us geographically because we're also working in Norway and Holland and Brazil at the moment, Livework studios in the different places. But we are definitely service design and like to be and sort of proudly focused on that as our core offer.
In the name Livework, is that particularly symbolic of anything, or how'd you come up with the name?
So, well, I'm very fond of talking about it as being, we like to have an impact on how people live and work. So services impact people's lives, and we do quite a lot of work which also has an impact on the experience of people in their jobs as well as consumers. So that's what it means to me these days. But the honest story is that we also wanted to have a good live-work balance as people when we started the company. So it had that meaning for us as well.
So that slash up and down could just as well have been an equal sign between the two, right?
Could have been, yeah.
Okay. Well, your first book, Service Design, wasn't necessarily the first book, okay, but it was done in the early stages when everybody was first talking about service design and what it was all about. But just to revisit it a bit, I haven't done a podcast on service design in a while, actually, but What makes service design a separate discipline?
Well, I think it's the design object. I think designers hadn't specifically identified services as a kind of a thing that you could design for in the way that they do with products or, with graphics or, something specific like vehicle design. And I think there's specific qualities that services have that mean you need to approach design, applying design or, using design to help to create and improve services. Specifically that, services are things that are experienced through time. You can't just pick them up and have a look at them. You have to experience them. And they're delivered in, the kind of academic term is heterogeneously. They come at you in different ways through digital or human or environmental channels. So their service design kind of requires almost an orchestration of a number of different moving parts.
Well, so service design just isn't this digital thing like UX is then, right?
No, and I think that's why one of the reasons we started the firm, the three of us who founded Livework had worked for what were called web agencies at the time. We'd worked on a lot of services delivering the digital component of it, and we thought there was a bigger picture out there. We'd also seen some of our projects fail because the digital and the kind of offline elements of the service weren't well integrated. And I think recently service design has got a lot of airtime in the digital space, but for Livework it's very much a multi-channel thing, and we have work that we've done which has been purely about the human beings delivering a service and how they do their jobs.
Your new book, Service Design for Business, I'm actually having a lot of fun with it, and and maybe it should be read to cover, but I've just been all over it, picking points out and reading it and such. Am I doing it wrong?
No, that's really great to hear. I'm really happy because we wanted that. We almost thought of having an instruction that you could do that, because it's definitely quite modular. Each of the challenge areas we've addressed should be something that you could say, hey, that's relevant to me or my project, and I want to just look at that piece. So that's great.
Well, I think I've read it all, okay, but I'm not really sure. So it's like
we need a checklist on the contents page.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe that's what I should have done.
Yeah.
Let me dive into a couple areas of it and kind of get in the meat of it a little. But
Okay.
one of my problems with service design in the past is the idea of this customer journey mapping. You know,
Okay.
we play so heavy on it, okay? It seems to be such a big part. And I've always thought people or a few people arrive at a given point in a service experience from a multiple of ways.
Hmm.
And am I wrong in my thinking, or do I need to make a path for each of them, or do we just try to push someone down a certain path?
I think that's a great question. I'm not sure if I have all the answers. I agree that it's dangerous to start mapping a customer journey as if there's only one, and it's also probably too much to ask that we map every journey. I just sprung to mind. We've been doing some work with a electricity and gas company where we were talking about one particular journey when people move home and how they transition their account, which should be really simple, but they have 300 different permutations of how that might actually occur depending on what tariff, when you've told them, what kind of credit rating you've got. So it gets very complicated. So you were interested in talking about the life cycles as well. I think there are what we try and get across in the book is that there are these kind of phases that people need to go through with a service. So you need to move from awareness to consideration to uptake to being a new user and then renewal. There are these kind of predictable phases that people move through, but how they get from point to point can be very different. So I think designing the specific touch points in the service to be flexible enough to cope with different routes through. The other thing, I think it varies. I think you can apply a customer journey mapping to something like air travel and be fairly kind of confident because it's a journey and it's quite set in its structure. But if you're talking about something less linear, then you're in danger.
Well, to jump in that life cycle thing a little bit,
Yeah.
I think of, some of these things that you have this. I'll jump into another point we talked in the book too there as I'm talking here. I kind of look at the customer journey map that we have these blobs, these oblong, these ugly looking circles and stuff that are kind of a scenario in it. Okay.
Right.
And those things are along the journey. Okay. and it's easier to explain maybe something in a scenario than it is kind of this linear process of what someone's doing.
Yep.
And do you agree with that? And do you talk about that in the book at all?
Well, to start with the life cycles, I think one thing, because this book is very deliberately service designed for business, and one thing that's very important for large businesses or any business that wants to grow is to be efficient with its customers, plural, and have an impact on the top and the bottom line in the way that and the way that they interact with customers, having a role to play in how successful they are. And that's to do with all your customers, your installed base of customers, and it's thousands or millions of people. So if we've worked a lot with public transport, and they're geared up to deal with mass customers moving through stations and all the stresses that poses. And that's where the life cycle really comes in, because it talks to that level. Whereas I think the journey can be too much to do with a story about a particular individual and how they get on. So does that make sense? I think there's a tension between design's focus on the individual experience and a kind of big operational business focused on how do we serve this large number of people. So we're trying to reconcile those two things and make design more relevant to a business audience.
Sure, and let's touch upon scenarios in there a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, how does scenarios play a role in this?
Well, I think, again, scenarios are often a business issue. A business will have a number of different options for how they go about something, and we can look at those options and what they will mean for the customer and their experience. So we can help to assess different business scenarios through the customer's eyes and make good decisions about which will be most successful for both parties, rather than, so what choices. We did a piece of work for a payment company where they had a number of different business scenarios for how they set up the service, technically. And we were able to look at how those would what that would be like as a customer experience and which one would be most likely to be adopted.
What's the best way to contact you and for someone to learn more about the book?
So there is a website for the book. It's liveworkstudio.com/SD4B, I think. But yeah, have a search for service design. There's a Twitter account for the book as well. Those are two good channels for Livework. Twitter will get answered.
Okay. What's Livework's best website to go there?
So liveworkstudio.com.
Okay. Ben, I would like to thank you very much for your time today. This podcast will be available on the Business 901 iTunes Store and the Business 901 blog site. So thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Joe.